You are a transaction. Duke Alistair's voice was cold, final. He did not look at her as he spoke. Sarah stood in the grand foyer. Her simple wool dress felt like a sack of ashes. The marble floor was icy beneath her thin shoes. She clutched a small, worn Bible. "My debts are settled," the Duke continued. He finally turned. His eyes swept over her. They held no warmth, only calculation. "Your father's land now covers my obligations, and you are the receipt." Sarah's breath caught. She had known this was not a love match, but to hear it stated so plainly? "You will be my wife in name only," Alistair declared. He walked a slow circle around her, as one would appraise a flawed horse. "You will live here. You will not embarrass me. You will be silent." She lifted her chin, a small act of defiance. "Do you understand? A girl?" A servant snickered from the shadows. Sarah met the Duke's gaze. Her voice was a whisper, but clear. "I understand, Your Grace." He smirked. It was a cruel expression. "Good. Your quarters are in the East Wing, the servants' wing. You will dine alone." He paused, leaned closer. His next words were meant to break her. "You are a peasant in a palace. Never forget it." He turned on his heel. His boots echoed on the marble. The sound faded. Sarah was left alone in the cavernous hall. The weight of his words pressed down. A transaction, a receipt. She looked at the Bible in her hands. Her thumb traced its worn leather. She did not cry. Not yet. For in her heart, a quiet truth remained. One the arrogant Duke could not see. One he would never think to look for. She was more than a receipt. She was a promise. Sarah's room was not a duchess's chamber. It was a servant's room, sparse and cold, a narrow bed, a single window overlooking the stables. The scent of hay and horses drifted up. This was her domain. Her days followed a cruel pattern. She took meals in the kitchen, alone at the small, scarred table. The cook, Mrs. Briggs, was not unkind, but she was cautious. She served Sarah simple broth and bread, without a word. "The Duke's orders," she'd mutter, avoiding Sarah's eyes. Sarah would nod and eat in silence. She was permitted in the main halls only at dawn, to clean the lesser drawing room, a test of humiliation. She would dust the portraits of Alistair's noble ancestors. Their painted eyes seemed to mock her. One morning, Alistair saw her there, kneeling by the hearth. He stopped, a glass of brandy in his hand. Does the work suit you, wife?" Sarah kept her eyes on the ashes. "It is work, Your Grace." "It is your place," he corrected. His tone was smooth, poisonous, a reminder of the dirt you came from. He waited for a reaction, a tear, a flinch. Sarah simply nodded. She picked up her brush and continued. Her silence infuriated him. "You have no pride," he spat. She paused, looked up at him. Her gaze was clear, calm. "My pride is not in my surroundings, sir. It is in my hands." He stared, confused by her words, by her peace. He scoffed and walked away. In her room each night, Sarah would open her Bible. The candlelight danced over the pages. She read the Psalms, words of refuge, of a fortress for the oppressed. She prayed not for escape, but for strength, for a heart that would not harden. She tended a small potted herb on her windowsill. A thyme, a piece of home. It was green and stubborn, thriving against the cold stone. It was her secret act of rebellion, a living thing, growing in the shadows, just like her. The Duke announced a dinner, not for Sarah, for his peers, earls, viscounts, wealthy gentry. The hall was to be filled with laughter and clinking crystal. Sarah received her orders through a stern-faced butler. "You will serve the wine, madam." It was not a request. It was a sentence. That evening, she stood by the sideboard, dressed in a plain, gray dress. One of the maids had given it to her. It hung loose on her frame. She held a heavy silver decanter. The guests arrived in a swirl of silk and arrogance. They saw her. The whispered questions were loud enough to hear. "Is that her? The bride? Good heavens! He made her a servant." Alistair smiled. A sharp, yet victorious smile. The dinner began. Sarah moved silently, filling goblets, keeping her eyes down. The talk was of politics, of hunting, of money. Then Lord Everley, a portly man with a loud voice, pointed at her. "I say, Alistair, is this your new method? Marrying the help to save on wages?" The table erupted in cruel laughter. Sarah's hand trembled. Wine splashed onto the polished table. A sudden silence fell. Alistair stood. His face was dark with fury. He walked to her, took the decanter from her hands. "Clumsy girl," he hissed, for all to hear. "You stain what you cannot comprehend." He turned to his guests. His voice was a performance. "Forgive her. She is still learning her place, which is evidently on her knees." He pointed to the spill. "Clean it." Every eye was upon her. Sarah knelt. She took a cloth from her apron. She wiped the dark liquid from the wood. Her cheeks burned, but her soul felt frozen. As she worked, her gaze fell to the floor, to the intricate pattern of the parquet. There, near the foot of the Duke's chair, a single floorboard was different, slightly raised, with a strange, faint mark carved into its edge, a mark she had seen before, long ago, in a forgotten corner of her childhood home. She finished cleaning, stood, and retreated to the shadows, but her mind raced. Her heart pounded a new, strange rhythm. What was that symbol doing in the Duke's own dining hall? The mark haunted her. It was a simple thing, 3 interlocking circles, crowned by a tiny cross. She saw it every time she closed her eyes. She had to know. Days passed. Sarah performed her duties, but a new purpose burned within her, quiet, steady. She found Mrs. Briggs alone in the pantry. "The floor in the dining hall," Sarah began, her voice soft. "The parquet is beautiful," the cook grunted, weighing flour. "Old, centuries old, laid by the first Duke." "Was he a pious man?" Sarah asked. "Careful." Mrs. Briggs paused. She looked at Sarah, a flicker of something kinship. "Aye, different times. They say he had a chapel built right into the house, sealed it up generations ago, when faith went out of fashion." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Where?" The cook shrugged. "East wing, behind the old linen storage, just a wall now." The East wing. Her wing. That night, Sarah took a single candle. She crept down the silent corridor, past the linen storage. The wall there was plain, covered in faded wallpaper. She ran her fingers over it, searching. Then she felt it. Not a mark to see, a seam to feel. A vertical line in the plaster, perfectly straight. Her candle flickered. She pressed her ear to the wall. Nothing but silence. But then, a draft. A faint, cold breath from the other side. There was a space behind there. A secret. For the first time since her arrival, a smile touched Sarah's lips. Small, but real. It was not a victory. Not yet. But it was a crack in the darkness. A sliver of light. She returned to her room. Her mind was alive with possibilities. She looked at her pot of thyme. It had sprouted a new, brave shoot. Growth in hidden places. The next morning, Alistair summoned her. He stood before a towering portrait of a severe-looking ancestor. "You will polish this frame," he commanded. "Every inch, with your hands. No cloth." It was meant to degrade her. Sarah simply nodded. She fetched the beeswax. She began to work. Her fingers smoothed over the ornate, gilded wood. As she worked near the bottom corner, her thumb caught on a roughness, a carving hidden in the scrollwork. She glanced down. Her blood went cold. There it was again. The same 3 circles, the same tiny cross, hidden in plain sight, in the Duke's own portrait gallery, a sign meant for her. Alistair's cruelty found a new focus. He decided Sarah must learn graces, a mockery of education. He ordered her to the music room each afternoon, to sit silently, while his hired companion, a sharp-faced woman named Miss Finch, played. "Observe," he would say, lounging in a chair. "This is culture. This is refinement. Things your blood will never understand." Sarah sat, hands folded, listening. One day, Miss Finch played a complex sonata. Her fingers flew across the keys. The music was beautiful and sad. Without thinking, Sarah hummed along, softly. The melody was familiar, an old hymn her mother used to sing. The music stopped abruptly. Alistair stood. "You dare," he whispered. The room grew cold. "It was a hymn, Your Grace," Sarah said quietly. "Silence!" he roared. He crossed the room in 3 strides. He loomed over her. "You do not add to this house. You are a stain upon it. Your voice is not welcome here." Miss Finch looked down, smirking. "You wish to sing?" Alistair's voice dropped to a venomous hiss. "Then sing for your supper, like the beggar you are." That evening, he made her stand in the kitchen doorway, before the entire staff. "Sing," he commanded. "Sing your little hymn for your bread." The servants watched. Some pitied. Most were amused. Sarah's face was pale, but she lifted her chin. She closed her eyes, and she sang. Her voice was clear, pure. It filled the stone-walled kitchen with a sorrowful grace the grand piano could never capture. "Rock of ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee." The mocking smiles faded. The kitchen maids stopped their work. Mrs. Briggs wiped her eye with her apron. Alistair's smirk vanished. He heard it, the raw, undeniable power in her faith. It shamed his empty grandeur. He could not bear it. "Enough!" he shouted, cutting her off. He threw a crust of bread at her feet. "Take your reward and get out." Sarah knelt, not in submission, to pick up the bread. She looked up at him. Her eyes held no hatred, only a deep, weary pity. It unnerved him more than any defiance. He stormed away. The staff scattered. Later, in the silent, sleeping house, Sarah returned to the east wing wall, to the hidden seam. This time, she carried a thin hairpin. She worked it into the crack, gently, probing. Something inside clicked. A small, hidden latch gave way. A section of the wall, no wider than a book, swung inward, revealing not a chapel, but a shallow, dusty niche, and inside it, a small, iron-banded chest, covered in a century of dust. Sarah reached out. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. What lay inside was a mystery, a secret buried by time. But the lock was strong, and she had no key, yet. Winter arrived with a vengeance. A bitter cold seeped into the stones of the east wing. Sarah's thin blanket was no match for it. She fell ill. A deep, rattling cough took hold of her chest. Fever burned her skin. She shivered in her narrow bed. For 3 days, no one came. No food, no water, no medicine. She was forgotten, or worse, left to perish. On the 4th day, Mrs. Briggs risked the Duke's wrath. She left a bowl of thin broth and a cup of water by the door. Like she did not enter. Sarah dragged herself from the bed. She drank. The water was like ice. The fever dreams were vivid. She saw her mother's face, heard her father's laugh from a sun-drenched field. A life of love now so far away. She saw Alistair's cold eyes, his smile of contempt. The cold and the heat warred within her. The loneliness was a physical weight, crushing her. This was her end, to die alone, in a servant's room, unloved, unmourned. The despair was a black ocean. It threatened to pull her under. She crawled back to her bed. Her body was failing. But her spirit made one last, gasping reach. She clutched her Bible to her chest. She had no strength to open it. She looked toward the small, frost-rimed window, and she prayed. Not a polite prayer, a raw, torn cry from the depths. "My God," she whispered, and her voice a broken rasp. "My God, why have you forsaken me?" She coughed, a wrenching sound. "I am alone. I am cold. I am nothing in their eyes." Tears cut tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Have I not been faithful? Have I not endured?" She gasped for air. "I cannot see your purpose. This pain is too great." She closed her eyes, a final plea, softer now. "I am lost. If you are there, if you hear the forgotten, please, show me a sign, or let me come home." She fell into silence, spent. The room was still, only the sound of her ragged breath. Then, a sound, a faint tap, tap, tap at her window. A small brown sparrow had landed on the icy ledge. It pecked at the glass, its head tilted. One bright black eye looked directly at her. It held something in its beak, a single dried sprig of thyme. It tapped the glass once more, then dropped the sprig and flew away. Sarah stared. A fragile, impossible warmth bloomed in her chest. It was not a cure, not a rescue, but it was an answer. She was not forgotten. The sparrow's visit changed everything. Sarah's fever broke that night. Weakness remained, but a new resolve burned it away. She had to open the chest. The key. It had to be somewhere. A lock that old. The key would be near, hidden, but not gone. She remembered the mark, the 3 circles and cross. It was a signature, a family sigil, but not Alistair's. His was a hawk and a sword. This was older. She waited until the deep of night. The house slept. Wrapping her shawl tight, she took her candle and hairpin. She went not to the niche, but to the portrait gallery, to the severe ancestor with the hidden mark. She studied the painting in the flickering light. The man held a rolled parchment in his hand. His other hand rested on a book, a Bible. Sarah's gaze fell to the Bible in the painting. Its cover was detailed, and there, tooled in gold, the 3 circles, the cross. Her breath caught. She looked at the painted Bible, then at her own, worn copy in her hand. An idea, wild and sudden, struck her. She hurried back to her room. She sat on her bed, opened her Bible to the very front, to the flyleaf. It was blank. But her mother had always said. She held the page close to the candle flame, gently warming it. Slowly, faintly, brownish lines began to appear. Old, faded ink, a hidden family tree, names and dates written in a delicate hand. Her eyes traced the generations, down, down, to the bottom. There she saw her mother's name, Eleanor, and above it a name she did not know, Lord Benjamin Hawthorne, and a note in tiny script, "For our daughter in exile, the truth is your shield. The key is with the first. The first Duke." Sarah's mind raced. The first Duke's chapel, his sealed room. She went back to the niche, to the small, iron-banded chest. She examined it not for a lock, but for the mark. And there it was, on the bottom, the 3 circles. She pressed them. in the sequence of the family tree she'd just seen. A soft click echoed in the stone cavity. The lid was not locked. It was latched by a hidden mechanism. With trembling hands, she lifted it. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, lay not jewels, but parchment, a thick, sealed document, and atop it a heavy, ornate signet ring. She lifted the ring, held it to the candlelight. It bore the hawk and sword of the current duke, but she turned it over. On the inner band, worn but unmistakable, was the true seal. The three interlocking circles, crowned by a cross, the seal of the original lineage, the true title. A title that predated Alistair's family by 100 years, a title that, by ancient law and royal decree, had never been extinguished. It had only been waiting. A grand ball was announced, the event of the season, to celebrate the Duke's recent, profitable union. A final, public humiliation for Sarah. She was to attend, as a servant, to pour champagne. The night arrived. The great hall glittered, lords and ladies in silks and diamonds. Alistair held court, smug and triumphant. Sarah stood at her post. The iron chest's secret burned within her. The signet ring was a heavy weight in her apron pocket. The evening wore on. Laughter grew loud, cruel. Alistair, emboldened by wine, called for silence. He raised his glass. "A toast," he boomed, "to new beginnings and to reminders of how far we have risen." His eyes found Sarah. The crowd followed his gaze. A hush of anticipation fell. "Come here, girl," he commanded. Sarah did not move. "I said, come here." Slowly, Sarah walked forward. The sea of finery parted for her plain gray dress. Every eye was upon her. "You see before you," Alistair announced to his guests, "the virtue of practicality. A wife who knows her place, at the margins." Snickers rippled through the crowd. Sarah stopped before him. She looked not at him, but at the assembled nobility. "Your Grace," she said. Her voice, so long silent, was clear. It carried. "You speak of my place." "I do," he sneered. "And you are out of it." "Am I?" she asked, quietly. She reached into her apron. She pulled out the heavy signet ring. She held it aloft. Candlelight flashed on the gold. A confused murmur spread. "What is this peasant trinket?" Alistair laughed, but his eyes narrowed. "It is no trinket," Sarah said. She turned the ring, showed the inner band, the three circles and cross. "It is the seal of the true lineage of this house, the Hawthorne Seal." The name Hawthorne struck the room like lightning. Gasps echoed. "Lies!" Alistair roared, stepping forward. "My family won these lands." "Your family usurped them," Sarah declared, her voice rising. She pulled the ancient parchment from her pocket, unfurled it. "By royal decree of Queen Anne, the title, the lands, the entail, all passed through the female line. Upon the extinction of the male." She looked directly at Alistair. Her gaze was fire. "My mother was Eleanor Hawthorne, the last true heir. You married no peasant, Alistair." She paused. Let the silence scream. "You married your rightful Duchess." The room erupted. Shock, outrage, astonishment. Alistair's face went from red to ashen white. He staggered back. His glass fell from his hand, shattering on the marble. The truth was out. It hung in the air, undeniable. The power in the room shifted. It drained from him and flowed, for the first time, to her. Sarah stood tall, the ring in her hand. The humble girl was gone. In her place stood a woman of legacy and of divine appointed justice. The scandal spread like wildfire. By morning, it was the talk of the county. By afternoon, the city. The arrogant Duke, The Humble Duchess. A tale fit for a storybook, but this was no fiction. A solicitor arrived. Then, two. Then a barrister from London. The ancient parchment was examined. The seal was verified. The lineage was indisputable. The law was clear. Alistair was summoned to the library. Sarah was already there. Seated in the chair he once called his own. He entered, a ghost of his former self. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate fury. "This is a trick," he spat, but his voice lacked conviction. "The Crown's archivists disagree," said the senior barrister, a stern man named Mr. Lowell. "The entail is valid. The title and all attached properties revert to Lady Sarah. Immediately." "Lady Sarah?" Alistair choked on the words. "Her Grace, the Duchess of Hawthorne," Mr. Lowell corrected coldly. Alistair's world crumbled. The house, the lands, the wealth, all were hers by ancient right. His own title was revealed as a hollow shell, built on a forgotten crime. His friends abandoned him. Invitations were rescinded. His name became a joke in the clubs. The man who married his better, and never knew it. He was allowed to stay. In the East Wing. A guest in what was now her house. The final blow came at week's end. Sarah stood in the grand foyer, the same spot where he had called her a receipt. She wore a simple but elegant dress of deep blue. Alistair was brought before her to hear her terms. He could not meet her eyes. "You may remain," Sarah said. Her voice was calm, not cruel. "In the gatekeeper's cottage, it is humble, but it is clean, and it is more than you offered me." He flinched. "You will have an allowance, enough to live, not enough to pretend." He finally looked up. His eyes were hollow. "You humiliate me." Sarah shook her head slowly, a profound sadness in her gaze. "No, Alistair, you humiliated yourself. I am merely removing the stage." She turned to Mrs. Briggs, now the head of her household. "Please see that his things are moved." As he was led away, a broken man, Sarah looked around the hall. The portraits of his ancestors seemed to frown, but the stone floor felt solid beneath her feet. The house, at last, was silent, not with the silence of oppression, but with the peace of justice served. Change came gently, like the first thaw. Sarah ordered the East Wing rooms opened. Windows were unshuttered. Sunlight, long absent, flooded the cold corridors. She did not move into the Duke's lavish suite. Instead, she chose a sunny room overlooking the gardens. It was simple, airy, full of light. Her first act was to open the sealed chapel. Workmen carefully dismantled the false wall. Behind it, a small, beautiful space was revealed. Stained glass windows, dusty but intact. A plain stone altar. The air inside was still, sacred. Sarah knelt there that first evening, not in desperation, in gratitude. She had the portrait gallery changed. The severe ancestor with the hidden mark, the first Duke, her true ancestor, was moved to a place of honor. Alistair's hawk and sword lineage was placed in a side hall, a different kind of justice. Mrs. Briggs became her steadfast companion. The cook's kindness, once given in secret, was now rewarded with trust and respect. One afternoon, a visitor arrived, the Reverend Mr. Albright from the village parish, a kind, or older man who had heard the remarkable tale. He found Sarah in the restored chapel. She was arranging wildflowers on the altar. "Your Grace," he said, bowing his head. "Please," Sarah said, smiling. "Call me Sarah." They talked for a long time, of faith, of purpose, of the weight of legacy. "This house has been a place of power for centuries," the Reverend said, "but rarely a place of grace. Sarah looked at the sun streaming through the colored glass, painting the floor in hues of ruby and gold. "It will be now," she said softly. She established a fund for the village school, for the widows and orphans. The wealth of the estate, so long hoarded, began to flow outward, a river of blessing. In the evenings, she would walk in the gardens, the same gardens she had only ever viewed from a high, cold window. She touched the blooming roses, or smelled the rich earth. She was home, not just in a house, but in her own skin, in her rightful place. The ghost of Alistair's cruelty faded, replaced by a gentle, firm authority. One evening, she stood on the terrace. The sunset painted the sky in glory. She wore the signet ring on her hand. It felt not like a weight, but a promise fulfilled, a promise of belonging, of a love that had watched over her across the centuries. Her heart, once so small and afraid, felt vast and full, ready for the peace that had finally come. Years did not pass idly. The estate flourished under Sarah's care. Fields yielded abundant harvests. Tenant cottages were repaired. Laughter returned to the halls. It was a different sound, warmer. Sarah never married again. Her heart belonged to a higher purpose and to a quiet, deep contentment. She became known as the gardener Duchess, often found with her hands in the soil, tending the roses, cultivating a vast herb garden where the old kitchen midden had been. One bright spring morning, she stood there. The scent of thyme and lavender filled the air. Mrs. Briggs, now quite old and dear, sat on a bench nearby. "You've made it beautiful, Sarah," she said, her voice soft. "It was always meant to be," Sarah replied. She brushed the earth from her hands. She looked toward the gatekeeper's cottage. Smoke curled from its chimney. Alistair lived there still, a quiet, solitary figure. He tended a small plot of vegetables. He had written her one letter, a single sentence of apology. She had not replied. Forgiveness was a private journey. For them both. Her work was her prayer, her service, her song. That evening, she walked to the chapel. It was her custom. The setting sun streamed through the stained glass, casting a mosaic of light on the stone floor. She knelt, not in want, in fullness. "Thank you," she whispered. The words were simple, but they held a universe of feeling. For the darkness that taught me to see the light, for the silence that taught me to hear your voice, for the winter that made me cherish the spring. She closed her eyes. A lifetime of moments played behind her lids. The cold foyer, the cruel laughter, the sparrow at the window, the weight of the ring, the gasp of the crowd. Through it all, a thread of grace, unbroken. "You lifted the needy from the ash heap," she prayed, her voice steady with conviction. "You made them sit with the princes of their people." She opened her eyes. The last of the sun's light glowed like embers on the altar. A verse from her childhood, from the Psalms, settled in her heart. It was no longer just words on a page. It was her story, woven into her very breath. He raises the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes. With the princes of his people, she stood. The peace in the room was palpable, a living thing. She blew out the candle and walked into the twilight, a duchess, a daughter, a woman of faith. Her legacy was not in stone or title. It was in the restored dignity of a single human soul, and in the quiet, unshakable truth that no one is ever forgotten. Not by the God who sees,